Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome to the Have You Heard podcast, episode number 3. Tonight we're going to start our show with what's happening on our farms this week. Then we're going to discuss cattle working facilities. I'm Morgan Hayes, assistant professor in the Ag Engineering Department at University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And my husband and I farm in Boyle County, about 500 acres. It's a commercial cattle and hay operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering, focusing on precision livestock farming. And also I have a farm in Mercer County where we have Angus cattle and hay production.
Well, it's good to have you back here in the building today, Josh. We've been very busy on the road the last couple weeks. So let's start off with what's happening on your farm this week.
Well, we actually had to give the spring group a little bit of hay this week. So this past week, we moved our spring group. The deer had been challenging our electric fences, so we finally moved them back up close to the barn and started giving them hay. So that's our first time we've had to give them hay. And our other fall herd, we went ahead and worked them. This kind of worked for the upcoming Black Friday. So we're getting everybody synchronized to breed on Black Friday. And some will come in Thanksgiving Day, but we'll breed them as necessary.
Awesome. And we're going to talk about the cattle working a little bit later because that's our main topic for today. And we were lucky to have a class out there for your working this past week. So we both got to experience that. On my farm this week, we got our bulls in for our fall herd. I know that that's a little bit early for some people, but we do start our calving season a little before September 1. So our bulls went in on Sunday. Other things that happened, we are feeding hay pretty aggressively, and our last group of cows that are out on one group of pasture are actually coming in tomorrow back into the main herd, but they still have some stockpiled grass. We're just moving around trying to utilize the last of that grass up right now.
So actually our fall herd, when we put the cedars in, we put them out onto forages. So they should be on forages for the next week or so, and then they'll hopefully clean up that last little bit of our stockpiled, and then we'll be done. But I noticed you mentioned your bulls. When do you test your bulls?
We usually test our bulls late September or the first couple weeks of October. We like to have about a month before breeding season just to make sure if there's anything that's off that we have time to replace anything that fails a test. Unfortunately, we had all the bulls tested. Everything was looking good. Everything went in on Sunday, and then we had one come up lame this morning. So there's no guarantees in life. We do test, though, usually about a month or so ahead of time.
Oh, yeah, we have some of the bulls that we raise. We go ahead and test them. We'll test them in August just because we're trying to make sure that we have them ready to go for when people are trying to buy them.
Right. Do you typically sell more bulls in the fall, or do you sell them in the spring?
It'll vary, but typically in the fall. And actually, it'll depend because you'll have some who plan early, so they'll be buying them August or maybe even sooner. And then you have ones who will buy them right now because something may have happened, or they're just they're just planning for the last minute.
Sure. Well, any day you don't have a bull is a day you don't have to feed a bull. And there are some people that do approach it with that philosophy in mind. Let's go ahead and get started with our topic today, which is cattle working. So why don't you describe what happened on Tuesday? Because we actually had an ag health and safety class out at your farm while we were doing some cattle working.
So we were getting ready to put in cedars. So for a couple of different groups of our cattle. And, we had the class come out there, and it's good for them to get hands-on experience. But for our facility at that farm, it's actually within a tobacco barn. And we've actually extended to some degree outside of the tobacco barn as well. So what we have in there is they come in the center alley of the tobacco barn, and they go through an angled funnel to the side. They go down one of the sides of that main center alley, then come out the end. So we have kind of a pretty good little loop where they come in to get worked. But we just did them in stages, small little groups. We had the big cows coming there at 40. We were able to get most of them worked up at once to some degree. But for the most part, we're trying to just keep them steadily flowing throughout the chute. So for me, I was working in the back since I'm the experienced and have the cattle handling, or the cattle know me. I'm in the back moving the cattle. Whereas the students, I had them operating the head gate, or I had them learning to put in the cedars, and also giving the shots.
Yeah, I think for the students, it's really important that they see both the awareness of the cattle, the design of the facility, and that's impact on safety. You know, we talked a little bit while we were there that you actually have a bull that you use as cleanup, but that the bulls actually are separate from the cows, and that's sometimes a safety thing too, that the bulls work a little differently. Similarly, heifers and show cattle work a little differently than mature cows. So, you know, knowing that you have some different groups and sorting them and working them independently. And this fall group has calves on their side, so that was another thing that you were handling in the background was, you know, keeping calves out of the pressing areas when the cows were getting crowded.
Getting crowded. And it's, we try to keep, when we push the cows up, you know, we try to let some of the calves, if the calves run back or as we're pushing them into the facility, you know, if they're able to escape, we let them to escape. But sometimes you have to go ahead and bring the calves because some of the cows will follow. If the calf runs away, the cows will follow their calf as they're leaving. So for some of them, we have to take them all. Some you can let a couple go here and there. And, you know, we try to do pressure relief. We'll let calves go as necessary or if possible from the facility. But, you know, working inside the tobacco barn, you know, we were lucky it's a good day, but we try to keep everything within that facility fairly dry and make it so that we have a really good footing. Because for a number of years, we did not have a good footing there, and it makes a world of difference. If you can't move and they can, you're in danger.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's certainly some concerns with that. You have a really nice, it's actually a Prefert brand, but a really nice squeeze chute, which, you know, for a lot of people, they don't understand the value of that unless they see cattle worked in real time. But the safety that you get out of having animal in a squeeze chute versus even just a headlock, I mean, you just gain every time you improve in that working facility. Safety for you working the cattle, also safety for the cattle while you're working them. We didn't really see any real injuries to the animals while we were there, which is good.
That's the other part of it is just selecting for, you know, we have cattle there that have been selected for a number of years to be tame. Any ones that have that high head and throw up their ears as soon as you walk into a pasture, I don't have much tolerance for them. I really, really, really like having tame animals. And so that's been one of our focuses.
That makes sense. Yeah. We have the same decision. Docility is a big decision maker for us on our cattle as well. And we've been pretty successful once we made that decision. It made a lot of things easier. We had a couple heifers this year that were pretty high-headed, and if they are still high-headed when they come back bred, there will be decisions on selling some bred animals. So absolutely, that's important. With the working facilities, the one thing I think is really interesting is you have a facility that actually uses more of what I would call a funnel style of crowding. There are three ways that we bring cattle in. So we typically have some form of pen to capture, hold, sort cattle. And then we have an area where we crowd those cattle down into a single file alley that leads to the head chute or the squeeze chute in this case. The different styles of crowding that are out there are a bud box, a sweep, or a tub. People use either term for that, or a funnel, which is what we used to see a lot. A lot of the designs out of like the 70s and even early 80s have a lot of funnels, even going up almost close to 2000. But Temple Grandin had a huge impact on cattle working here in the U.S., and she was a big proponent of using the tubs and circular design because the cattle naturally like to move in a circle. They like to turn back to where they came from. It takes advantage of the normal cattle movement. And the other thing we've seen sort of develop in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a lot of people invest in bud boxes, which also take advantage of normal cattle movement, but it's sort of a square box, and you just sort of put pressure on the cattle by where you stand and cause the cattle to go through their normal curved motion and escape through the opening, which puts them in the single file alley.
And, you know, the bud box, it has the ability also of like being a little more economical. I think
Absolutely.
That tub. So I've seen a lot of producers and the ability to work with relatively few workers to be able to handle and move cattle with relatively few workers is, I think, another pro. And there's ways to do it with a tub, and there's ways to, but I think I've seen a lot of on smaller operations with bud boxes just being economical and easy to use.
Yeah. Would you say that the bud box is probably your preference when doing a design now, or?
If it's a small operation, it is one of my preferences. Because a lot of times I'll see them have a square design, or they'll have an alley coming up to this facility they have, and then just getting animals worked. I think for the smaller operations, it just seems to make a lot of sense from an economical and then practical standpoint.
Yeah.
My preference would be I've drawn tubs for people. So if it's a tub, I've seen a lot of good tubs. I've seen some. I like the ones that are 270 where it does turn the animal all the way back around. Those work fairly well. And ones that go out the side, they give you the access to either send them down an alley or send them out to a loadout. So those can be very, very effective. So it just depends on what their goals are and how they're loading out, how they're working their cattle. A lot of it, it'll vary by site-specific considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you on that it's very site-specific. I have a tub at one of my facilities and a bud box at the other one. The bud box is really nice, especially in older tobacco barns where posts are typically set on 12s. You're almost ideally set up to build a bud box in there as long as your tiers aren't so low that you can't comfortably walk underneath them. I don't encourage removing tier rails in old tobacco barns. And generally the structure has to be sound to put any sort of working facility in there because these cattle do push. So we want to make sure we have a really secure facility if we go into an old tobacco barn. But I do have one that's set up in there, and I really enjoy that. I think the bud box fits well in that facility, and the cattle move well. I have lighting where I need it, and it works extremely well. I also have a tub that I have at a different facility, and that one I like as well. Some tubs seem to operate better than others, but like you, I would agree. I think the tubs work best, especially if they're a solid-sided tub, if they have a second access point to release those cattle out for loadout. That's where I think they really shine.
Yep.
I do like that even a self-built tub, if it's done correctly, gives you a lot of locking positions that you can be behind a gate. So if I was choosing for someone that had like a feeder operation or more flighty animals, I would certainly prefer a tub over a bud box, because in the bud box, you're engaging with the cattle one-on-one. With the tub, you get a gate between you and the animals, and that is a real safety benefit of that design. The one thing I will say is that tubs around here, a lot of times if they're solid-sided, they sometimes create some shadows, which can be challenging. So I'm actually a fan even of some of the open-sided tubs, or at least partially open-sided, so that there's a little bit more light in that tub. I think we get better movement with that. Some of those taller-sided stuff, they just give us some pretty good shadows, depending on the time of day we work cattle. So I'm actually a fan of both styles. I think both have benefits. I might even be slightly bigger fan of a tub if I don't know who the person is that's working the cattle.
Yes, I think a tub, if you have flighty animals or if they're less skilled, I think a tub would be the way to go. Bud boxes, it's really good for cow calves where you're selecting for genetics, you're selecting for hopefully animals who are docile, I think. And that's what you should be selecting for. And that's why I tell producers, like, that's the biggest impact you can have is just selecting for docility and making sure that you can safely work those animals. But I did see a while back the turret gate they have. It's a hydraulically operated tub sweep. And I really liked it. I really liked it just because it's hydraulically operated and then also was able to translate about the center point. So it was a neat option, something we can explore in the future, I think. But if you have a much larger operation, it would seem to be the way to go.
Yeah, some of the electronic gates in general, and some of that, especially with RFID technology, that can be a discussion for another day. But there are some really neat things on the market right now for sorting cattle, and they've really come up, I think, probably primarily through the dairy industry, where there's been a little bit more investment in some of that precision management. But we're seeing some people maybe invest in it on larger operations out in rangier states out west. Let's go ahead and finish up for the day, Josh, though, with just a quick update of what's happening on the farm next week. What are you going to get done between now and next week? And no guarantees here, but what's the goal?
Well, our goal is to pretty much take an inventory of all our supplies, make sure we have everything in line for the upcoming week. So we make sure we got our straws, our rods, and everything streamlined, queued up, ready to go for when we're doing the AI work. Then also just clean up some. We were doing a little bit of fencing. So I know you're probably still doing fencing. So we're doing a little bit of fencing. Had some challenge with the goats. We're making a permanent fence now.
Oh, there you go. Who doesn't love a good permanent fence? Sometimes I dream about them. I do so many of them, but that's maybe a personal problem I'm having currently. On our farm this week, we've got a couple things we got happening here. One, we're gonna have to deal with the bull that we just found out this morning was lame. So that'll be an animal we have to get up and work this weekend. He's still eating and everything, so he's fine until we get him up for working. And we have another bull in with that group of cows. But Ideally, we'd have 2 bulls in with this group. It is almost 50 head, so it's a little bit large for one bull. Other things we have happening, we will be feeding hay and sort of prepping some stuff for winter. We've got a couple pieces of equipment that still aren't cleaned up. There's always something that's not quite done, and that is the case for us right now. And other than that, I think we'll be putting out fires. We have a lot of hay deliveries. So a lot of people are starting, because we do a lot of hay sales, we do actually deliver hay. And this will fall on my husband more than me because I work here at Kentucky, at UK in Lexington. So I do less deliveries, but my husband will be doing a bunch of hay deliveries because people are really starting to pick up on hay. It's the first time we've really seen a lot of requests is probably in the last week. So you can tell people had good forage this year. It's only right now that people are starting to ask for some of their hay supply that we have stored for them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the weather had just turned, so we kind of seen the roller coaster here this week even. It was warm, 70 degrees yesterday, and we just see this roller coaster, and I think it's starting to definitely go on a downward trend.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a little wet and cold then this weekend. So
Yep, so probably winterizing some of the waterers.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Making sure everything with them is going to be functional and they're ready for this upcoming winter.
Yep, I talked to my mom last night, and she told me where the heaters were for the water tanks on her farm, so I will be installing them this weekend too. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, and with that, I'm going to close us out here. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.